Hey everybody, it's Alex at Motoroso.com, and in this video we're doing a detailed step-by-step installation guide on the new ARB Zenith Front Bumper for the new Ford Bronco. Now this is a pretty detailed installation because there's a lot of features in this bumper, and we made a separate product spotlight video about that, so if you'd like to learn more about the bumper, check out that video right over here. Now all the steps are going to be covered in this video, and you do want to do them in order because there's definitely in the instructions a few places where they don't tell you the order to do things, and so if you put a bracket in one place the first time, then you got to take it all back out and do it again. So we're going to save you all that time, and it is a lot of steps because there are a ton of components, but the reason for that is because they've engineered the heck out of this bumper, and this is a serious piece of equipment and at a great price, we might add. And if you'd like to buy it, we'll put a link to that right here and a link in the description as well. And those links will take you over to Motoroso.com where you can buy these products and a million others, and you can reach us there on live chat or call us toll free at 833-MOTOROSO. Now let's go ahead and dig into this install.
Before installing your ARB Zenith front bumper, you'll obviously need to remove your stock bumper. Now we have the plastic bumper on this one, but if you have the steel bumper, the process should be even easier. First, pull firmly to remove the front plastic bumper covers and disconnect the parking sensors from the plastic trim pieces. Using a 15mm socket, remove the 6 bumper mounting bolts on the front and the 2 on the bottom edge of the bumper. Before removing the bumper, you'll need to disconnect the parking sensor main harness on the driver's side. Then you can lift up to remove the front bumper. We're going to need to transfer over the parking sensors, lights, and wiring harness from this stock bumper. So we'll begin by removing the 10 and 15mm bolts holding the steel cover to the bumper and pull it out of the way. Then disconnect the fog lights and parking sensors all along the bumper and use a panel lever to remove your wiring harness. Remove the 4 bolts holding the fog lights, followed by the fog light itself. With a paint pen, we labeled our sensors starting from the driver's side 1 through 4 to ensure the correct placement on the ARB bumper. Now you can remove the sensors from the plastic panels by pushing outward on the tabs on both sides of the sensor. You can also remove the sensor mounting clips, but ARB supplies their own for mounting the sensors on the Zenith bumper. Now remove the skid plate by removing the 4 15mm skid plate mounting bolts. On the back of the bumper mounting plate, remove the plastic nut and remove the factory nut plate. Pull outwards to remove the rubber tow hook covers and then remove the 15mm tow hook mounting bolts and remove the tow hooks. If these are used as the lower intercooler mounting brackets, they will be reused. Your intercooler will hang down, but it's okay because the hoses are rubber, but feel free to support this if you're concerned about damage. If you have adaptive cruise control, first remove the cover by pulling out firmly. Using an 8mm socket, remove the 3 bolts holding the radar sensor in place and disconnect the wiring harness. Then remove the 4 8mm bolts holding the intercooler shutters from the frame. Using a panel lever, disconnect the wiring harness from the shutters and remove the pop clips holding the harness in place. We're going to need to free up some play on this wiring harness so that it can stretch to the new mounting location, so we're going to do some modifications. On this harness, cut off the first mounting clip and use a knife to carefully cut back the protective wrap about 8 inches. Do this slowly and carefully and make sure not to cut any of the wires inside the harness. Then rewrap the exposed wires with electrical tape. Now you can reconnect the wiring harness to the intercooler shutters, but don't reconnect the pop clips so you'll have enough slack to reconnect the sensors to the Zenith bumper. With the wiring harness in place, you can now loosely install the intercooler shutter housing. With everything on the Bronco prepared, we can now start assembling the ARB Zenith front bumper. There are a lot of components to this kit, so we highly recommend laying out all the parts for identification.
Alright, so this is one of the most complicated and confusing portions of the installation. With that nut plate out, we now need to install these brackets, and it's very important that you get the right brackets. So first of all, this is going to be the top plate bracket that's going to slide in and sit over the top plate of the intercooler mount. It's very important that this notch face inboard, in towards the inside of the vehicle. So that's going to sit up there like that. And then there's 2 other brackets here, and you got to make sure that you get the right combination of those. And those have to get wiggled in on the back side of this bracket here. And the way that you're going to identify it is it's going to have little holes cut out for those plastic posts that held the previous nut plate on there. So make sure you think through exactly which plates you need on each side. They're not very well marked. Once you look at them, you'll quickly figure out exactly which combination you need. Now, additionally, underneath this bracket, you're going to be using this 6mm spacer. Now, they call that a packer in the instructions. So you're going to have to fish through this absolutely mental bag of hardware to find the 2 of these spacers that you need to put under that bracket. So let's keep rolling.
You'll need to remove the 15mm intercooler top mounting plate bolt to create enough play in the plate to seat the brackets. The order in which these brackets are installed is very important. We recommend starting with the inside reinforcement bracket. Push up on the intercooler mounting plate, then slide the bracket into place. Once the inside bracket is in place, you can loosely install the intercooler top mount bolt with the supplied black 6mm spacer, which ARB calls a packer in their installation instructions. With that bolt loosely installed, you can now slide the top reinforcement bracket over the OEM bolt and wiggle it to get it around the integrated washer. This bracket will now sit between the OEM washer and above the 6mm spacer as seen here. You can now fully tighten the 15mm intercooler top mount plate bolt while making sure it doesn't rotate. Now you can set the outside reinforcement bracket in place. For additional reinforcement, ARB provides a 110mm bolt and crush tube. First, place another one of the 6mm black spacers in between the inside reinforcement bracket and the Bronco's frame. Then slide a spring washer onto the M10 bolt and feed the bolt through the reinforcement bracket and spacer. Now place the crush tube inside the frame from the front and push the M10 bolt through it. Now place the second 6mm black spacer in between the outside reinforcement bracket and the frame, and on the outside of the reinforcement bracket, place another spring washer and loosely install the M10 nylock nut. Now repeat this whole process on the opposite side of your Bronco. With all the brackets in place, you can reinstall the plastic nuts we removed earlier from the OEM nut plate to hold everything where it is. Now you can fully tighten the intercooler shutters mounting bolts. Now we're ready to start transferring components over to the new ARB bumper. Place your OEM or aftermarket fog lights into their corresponding cutouts on the ARB Zenith and install with the provided M6 bolts, nuts, and washers. To install parking sensors numbers 1 and 4 on the Zenith bumper, begin by installing the ARB supplied sensor housings and the corresponding backing clips. Next, simply click the parking sensors into the housings, making sure they are oriented in the same direction as factory top to bottom, sensor 1 on the driver's side and sensor 4 on the passenger side. Using the provided M8 bolts and washers, bolt the reinforcement brackets to the bumper. Now assemble the adaptive cruise control module by using the supplied M6 bolts, washers, and nuts. Install the adaptive cruise control to the bumper as seen here. Reinstall the plastic cover over the radar module by pressing it into place. Now identify the 4 square cutouts on each side of the bumper and insert the M8 cage nuts from the back side. Next, use the provided M6 bolts, washers, and nuts to attach the lower pan brackets to the bumper and tighten firmly. Use the provided M12 bolts, washers, and flange nuts to assemble the recovery points and fully tighten. Before mounting the bumper, place the recovery points into their corresponding locations in the bumper cutouts. Now grab 2 of the mounting bolts and washers and pass 1 bolt through each recovery point, and with a second set of hands, carefully place your bumper onto the chassis mount and hold it in place with a washer and nut from the backside. Now install and loosely tighten all the provided M12 bolts and flange nuts. Now we found that the body panel gap just in front of the fender was the best reference point for alignment. Now you'll check for alignment, and once you're satisfied with the bumper's gaps and alignment on each side, proceed to fully tighten all the bumper mounting bolts. You can now fully tighten the M10 hardware, which secures the reinforcement brackets and crush tube. In ARB's instructions, they want you to drill another hole from the front of the bumper, and in some cases this can require such a long drill bit that they suggest removing the bumper. We really didn't see a reason to drill these additional holes and install yet another bolt. This bumper isn't going anywhere, so we skipped this step, but you're welcome to go to town. Using the provided M8 button head bolts, we can now install the black recovery point covers. These thread into the cage nuts, but the cage nuts aren't very secure and they pop out easily, so take your time. You can now reconnect the wiring harness to the adaptive cruise control module. In order to re-secure the intercooler, you'll need to push it back up into place while holding it, then reinstall the lower intercooler mounting brackets, which in our case double as the OEM tow hooks. Now we'll begin reinstalling the factory wiring harness and sensors. Starting from the passenger side, connect the fog light and parking sensor 4. Run the wiring harness across the back side of the bumper to the driver's side and connect the fog light and sensor number 1. Then plug the main harness male connector into its corresponding female connector on the driver's side. The remaining 2 parking sensor connectors should be left easily accessible. With all your wiring in place, you can now use zip ties to clean everything up. To install parking sensors number 2 and 3 on the center plate, begin by installing the ARB supplied sensor housings and the backing clips. Next, simply click the parking sensors into the housings, making sure they are oriented in the same direction as factory. Holding the center plate in place, connect the wiring harnesses to parking sensors 2 and 3. Now fasten the center plate in place with the 4 stainless M8 buttonhead bolts, washers, and nuts. Using 4 M6 buttonhead bolts, washers, and nuts, fasten the lower area of the center plate to the lower pan brackets. Next, insert the M6 cage nuts into the lower wing panels. The wing nuts go on the back side of the panels, so you'll need to determine the corresponding left and right sides. Slide the wing panels into place, tucking them behind the mounting points, and then use the 3 black M6 bolts and washers to attach the panels to the main bumper. Then use 2 of the stainless M6 buttonhead bolts and washers to attach the under panels to the center plate. If your Bronco has a plastic skid plate, the area surrounding the toe points will need to be trimmed out before reinstalling the skid plate. After trimming, you can slide your skid plate into place behind the ARB center plate and fasten reusing the OEM 15mm bolts. ARB provides a wiring harness for the integrated 37-inch light bar, which comes with its own toggle switch and relay. Most Bronco owners will probably want to wire this in to one of the 6 OEM auxiliary switches, so we converted this wiring harness to a simpler upfitter harness. Starting at the end of the harness with the plug that connects to the light bar, just travel down the harness until you find the grounding connector and the relay. Simply cut the wire just before the relay, and your remaining wiring harness should look like this. Behind the bumper, find the female connector for the light bar and pull it across to the driver's side and down under the bumper. Connect this harness to the shortened harness from the previous step and pass it up into the engine bay using a line feed, making sure to avoid anything hot, sharp, or rotating. In the engine bay, route the wiring behind the battery and connect the ground to the common ground on the firewall. Then locate the bundle of auxiliary wires near the firewall and find the color of the wire that corresponds to your desired auxiliary switch. We chose auxiliary 3, which is the violet wire with green stripe. Strip about a ½ inch of insulation from the positive end of the harness to your desired auxiliary wire and connect them using a butt connector. Then turn the light on and off to make sure that the harness is installed correctly and you're finished with your installation.
All right, everybody, we hope you found that video helpful. Again, if you'd like to buy this ARB Zenith, we'll put a link to that right here and a link in the description. Now, if you'd like to learn more about a winch-compatible bumper, we recommend checking out the Fab 4 stubby front bumper, and we've got a video to that right here. That's what we put on our own Bronco. That thing is fantastic, and it's a really great price point for a winch-compatible, very low-profile bumper that has plenty of clearance for the biggest tires you can fit. We hope you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.